New Year's Eve started like any other, cheerful, full of laughter, and bustling with the clinking of glasses and the hum of conversation. My wife, Clara, had insisted on hosting this year. She spent weeks preparing, from choosing the perfect decorations to organizing a lavish feast. Our home brimmed with relatives and close friends, including my best friend, Aaron. The energy was electric, the atmosphere warm, and for a moment, it felt perfect. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, Clara tapped her glass, signaling for silence. She stood in the center of the room, radiant in a sequined dress that sparkled under the lights. "I just want to say how grateful I am for all of you," she began, her voice steady and confident. "This year has been challenging. But it's nights like this that remind me of what matters most, friends and family." The crowd murmured in agreement, raising their glasses. I smiled, proud of her poise and grace. But then, her tone shifted. Her voice dropped, colder now, cutting through the festive air like a blade. "However," she continued, looking directly at me, "not everything is as perfect as it seems." The room grew still. My stomach tightened as I felt her words targeting me. "My husband," Clara declared, her voice rising, "has been anything but the man I thought I married. He's a liar. A cheat. Someone who doesn't even care enough to provide for his own wife." Gasps echoed around the room. My heart raced, confusion washing over me in waves. "That's right," she sneered. "While I worked to make our home a sanctuary, he was out gallivanting with other women." I opened my mouth to respond, but the weight of the accusation left me speechless. My mind spun. This wasn't true. Not a single word of it. I had been nothing but loyal to her. "And you know what?" she continued, her voice trembling with rage. "I decided I wasn't going to sit back and be humiliated. So I took my revenge." She turned her gaze to Aaron, my best friend, who sat frozen in his seat. Her lips curled into a cruel smile. "Yes, Aaron," she said, her voice dripping with venom. "You and I know what happened." Aaron's face turned pale. He looked at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. The room erupted in whispers, a cacophony of shock and disbelief. I couldn't process what I was hearing. My wife, my Clara, had just admitted to betraying me with the person I trusted most. Betrayal and humiliation boiled within me, and the night that had started with joy turned into a nightmare. But even in the chaos, I made a silent vow: this wasn't over. Clara and Aaron would regret what they'd done. They would learn that there's a price for betrayal. The room was in chaos, voices overlapping, faces contorted in shock and dismay. Clara stood defiant, basking in the uproar she had created, while Aaron looked like a man about to be sick. My pulse thundered in my ears, drowning out the chatter as I struggled to process what had just unfolded. I stared at Aaron, searching his face for some sign that this was all a misunderstanding. But the guilt in his eyes told me everything I needed to know. He couldn't even meet my gaze. I didn't mean for this to happen," Aaron stammered, his voice cracking. It just did." Clara let out a bitter laugh. "Oh, don't act innocent now, Aaron. You were more than willing." A fresh wave of murmurs spread through the room. I clenched my fists, my nails digging into my palms. Every fiber of my being screamed to lash out, but I forced myself to remain still. This wasn't the time. I took a deep breath, willing my voice to remain calm, though my anger simmered dangerously close to the surface. "Clara," I said, my tone low but steady, "you're accusing me of things I didn't do. Why would you?" "Oh, don't even try to deny it," she snapped, cutting me off. "I've seen the messages. I've heard the rumors. You think you're so clever, hiding your indiscretions, but you're not." Her words didn't add up. Messages? Rumors? I had no idea what she was talking about, but I didn't get the chance to defend myself. Clara's voice rose again, addressing the guests now. "Let this be a lesson to everyone," she said. "A man who doesn't value his wife doesn't deserve her. And sometimes, the only way to get justice is to take matters into your own hands." The crowd's reaction was mixed. Some people looked at me with pity, others with judgment. But I didn't care about them. My focus was on the two people who had betrayed me so deeply. I took a step toward Aaron, and he flinched. "How long?" I asked, my voice ice cold. "How long has this been going on?" Aaron swallowed hard, glancing at Clara as if hoping she'd answer for him. When she didn't, he finally muttered, "A few months. A few months." Those words echoed in my mind, a sickening reminder of how long I had been living in ignorance. My best friend and my wife had been betraying me under my own nose, and I hadn't seen it. I nodded slowly, more to myself than to anyone else. "I see," I said quietly. "Well, thank you for your honesty, Aaron. And Clara, thank you for your speech. It was truly enlightening." My calm demeanor seemed to unsettle them more than any outburst could have. Clara frowned, and Aaron shifted uncomfortably in his seat. But I didn't wait for their responses. I turned and walked out of the room, leaving the stunned guests behind. As I stepped outside into the cold night air, the weight of the betrayal settled heavily on my shoulders. But beneath the pain, something else began to take shape, a plan. Clara thought she had humiliated me, but she had no idea what I was capable of. And Aaron, he would pay for this betrayal, too. Standing alone under the moonlit sky, I made a vow: I would take back control. And I would do it in a way either of them would ever forget. The days that followed were eerily calm. Clara acted as if the New Year's fiasco had never happened, smiling at neighbors, posting cheerful pictures on social media, and going about her life with an air of unshaken confidence. Aaron had disappeared, no doubt ashamed to face me again. To anyone looking in from the outside, we were just another suburban couple living an idyllic life. But beneath the surface, I was moving the pieces into place. First, I needed to understand what had driven Clara to make such baseless accusations. She had spoken about messages and rumors, but I knew there was nothing of the sort. I had always been faithful to her, and anyone who truly knew me would vouch for that. Something, or someone, had planted these ideas in her head. I started with her phone. Clara had always been careless about her passwords, and it didn't take long to access her texts and emails. As I scrolled through the messages, a pattern began to emerge. Clara had been exchanging messages with a coworker named Rachel, someone I barely knew. The conversations were laced with venom, Rachel feeding Clara's insecurities and fanning the flames of doubt. "Rachel, I saw Mark at that cafe again. He was with a woman. Looked pretty cozy if you asked me." Clara: "I knew it. He thinks I'm stupid." Rachel: "You deserve better, babe. Men like that never change." There was no truth to Rachel's claims, of course. I hadn't been to that cafe in months, and the only women I interacted with outside of work were relatives. It was clear Rachel had her own motives, but I couldn't yet discern what they were. I took screenshots of the messages and stored them in a hidden folder on my laptop. This wasn't the time to confront Clara. I needed to gather more evidence. Next, I turned my attention to Aaron. I visited the bar we used to frequent, a small, dimly lit place that had been our hangout spot for years. The bartender, Greg, was an old friend and someone I could trust. I casually asked him if Aaron had been around lately. "Funny you should ask," Greg said, polishing a glass. "He was here a few times last month. Had a lot on his mind, kept talking about some big mistake he made. Didn't go into details, though." Greg's words confirmed my suspicions. Aaron had been grappling with guilt long before Clara's public announcement. But guilt wasn't enough for me. I needed leverage. Over the next few days, I hired a private investigator to follow Aaron. It didn't take long for the PI to uncover a secret Aaron had been hiding, a gambling problem. Apparently, Aaron owed a significant amount of money to some less than savory characters, and they were beginning to lose patience. This was my opening. I arranged to meet Aaron at a neutral location, a quiet park where we wouldn't be overheard. He looked like a wreck, his usual confident demeanor replaced by a nervous energy. "What's this about?" he asked, fidgeting with his jacket. I handed him an envelope containing the PI's report. His face drained of color as he flipped through the pages. How did you? That doesn't matter, I said, cutting him off. What matters is that I have this now. And I'm willing to keep it between us, on one condition. Aaron swallowed hard. What condition? You're going to help me, I said, my voice calm but firm. You and Clara turned my life into a spectacle. Now you're going to help me set the record straight. He hesitated, clearly weighing his options, but we both knew he didn't have a choice. I had him cornered, and he wasn't in a position to fight back. Fine, he muttered. What do you want me to do? I smiled, the first genuine smile I'd had in weeks. Oh, you'll see soon enough. As I walked away from the park, a sense of grim satisfaction settled over me. Aaron was now a pawn in my game, and Clara's turn was coming. The plan was unfolding perfectly, and soon, both of them would understand the weight of their betrayal. Aaron was mine to control now, but I wasn't going to let him off the hook just yet. Trusting him to follow through without supervision was a risk I wasn't willing to take. Instead, I kept him close, manipulating his movements like a puppeteer. The first step was subtle but necessary, sowing seeds of doubt in Clara's mind. I knew her confidence stemmed from the belief that she held all the cards. She thought I was broken, defeated. It was time to remind her that appearances could be deceiving. One evening, as Clara was busy scrolling through her phone, I casually brought up her coworker. I ran into someone interesting today, I said, my tone light. She barely glanced up. Oh? Who? Rachel. She seemed surprised to see me. Clara froze, her fingers hovering over her phone. Rachel? Where? At the grocery store. I lied smoothly. She asked if we were doing okay. Said something about you being upset with me. Clara's expression hardened. What did you tell her? Nothing much, I said, shrugging. Just that things between us are fine. Her lips tightened, and I could see the wheels turning in her head. Rachel had been her confidant, the one fueling her accusations against me. But now, I'd planted the idea that Rachel might be talking behind her back. I didn't push further. I didn't need to. Clara's mind would do the rest, unraveling the trust she had in Rachel bit by bit. Meanwhile, I set Aaron to work. He was to spread a carefully constructed story within our social circle, a tale of regret and redemption. According to Aaron, Clara's accusations at the party had been exaggerated, fueled by a misunderstanding. He played the repentant friend, claiming he had made mistakes but was determined to make things right. It wasn't a complete lie, which made it all the more believable. People love a redemption arc, and Aaron's newfound humility began to soften the blow of Clara's public spectacle. Slowly, the narrative shifted. The whispers about my supposed infidelity grew quieter, replaced by murmurs questioning Clara's motives. To ensure the story gained traction, I made subtle appearances at social gatherings, carefully curated to look like the wronged yet dignified husband. I wasn't confrontational. I didn't need to be. The more composed I appeared, the more others began to question Clara's version of events. As the weeks passed, Clara grew restless. Her once steady confidence faltered as she sensed the shift in the air. One evening, she confronted me. "Have you been talking to people about what happened?" she demanded, her eyes narrowing. I looked up from my laptop, feigning confusion. "Talking about what?" "About the party. About us," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "People are looking at me differently. They're questioning me." I leaned back in my chair, keeping my expression neutral. "Maybe they're just starting to see the truth." Her face reddened with anger. "What truth? That you're a liar? A cheat?" "No, Clara," I said, my voice calm but firm. "The truth about who's really been lying." Her mouth opened to retort, but she closed it again, her eyes searching mine for answers. For the first time, I saw uncertainty in her gaze. She was beginning to realize she had underestimated me. Behind the scenes, I continued gathering evidence. The messages between Clara and Rachel painted a picture of manipulation, one that I could use to expose their scheme. At the same time, I kept the pressure on Aaron, making sure he stayed on script. I knew Clara wouldn't back down easily. She was stubborn, prideful, and unwilling to admit she might have been wrong. But her fortress of lies was starting to crumble, and I was there to hasten its collapse. The storm was brewing, and Clara had no idea how close it was to hitting her. The tension in the house was palpable. Clara's usual sharp remarks had given way to silence, a sign that doubt was creeping into her mind. She spent more time on her phone, scrolling through messages and social media, likely trying to gauge the whispers that had begun circling back to her. But no amount of damage control could stop the inevitable. I had planted the seeds, and now it was time for the next phase. One morning, as Clara was sipping her coffee, I slid a printed sheet of paper across the table. She glanced at it, her brows furrowing. "What's this?" she asked. "An invitation," I replied, keeping my voice casual. "To dinner. Just the two of us." Clara's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "Because we need to talk," I said simply. "Away from the house. Away from everyone else." She hesitated, suspicion flickering across her face, but she eventually nodded. "Fine." The dinner was set for the weekend at a quiet, upscale restaurant we had visited during happier times. It wasn't just about the conversation. I needed Clara in a setting where her guard would be down, where I could observe her reactions without interruption. In the days leading up to the dinner, I turned my attention back to Aaron. He had been dutifully following my instructions, spreading the narrative I had crafted for him. But I needed more than just words. I needed him to confess. I arranged to meet him again, this time at a discreet location, an empty office space I had rented under a pseudonym. When Aaron arrived, he looked even worse than before. The weight of his gambling debts and the pressure I was putting on him had taken their toll. "What now?" he asked, his voice weary. "I need you to record something for me," I said, pulling out a small digital recorder. Aaron's face paled. "What kind of recording?" "A confession," I replied. "I want you to admit to everything, your affair with Clara, the lies, the betrayal. All of it." He stared at me, his expression a mix of shock and dread. "You're going to use this against me." "Of course I am," I said coldly. "But you don't have a choice, do you?" Aaron looked like he wanted to argue, but he knew I was right. After a long moment, he sighed and nodded. "Fine. What do you want me to say?" I pressed the record button and gestured for him to begin. He hesitated, then started speaking. "My name is Aaron and I had an affair with Clara. It was a mistake, one I regret more than anything. Mark didn't deserve this. He's been nothing but a loyal friend, and I betrayed him. I let Clara convince me to go along with her plan to humiliate him, and I'll regret it for the rest of my life." He paused, looking at me with pleading eyes. "Is that enough?" "For now," I said, stopping the recording. "But if you step out of line, Aaron, I won't hesitate to use this." Aaron left the office, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I watched him go, a sense of grim satisfaction settling over me. The recording was my insurance, my guarantee that Aaron wouldn't betray me again. When the evening of the dinner arrived, I dressed carefully, choosing an outfit that conveyed calm confidence. Clara was already waiting when I arrived at the restaurant, her expression guarded. The hostess seated us at a quiet corner table, away from prying eyes. The first part of the meal passed in tense silence. Clara toyed with her fork, glancing at me occasionally, waiting for me to break the ice. Finally, I leaned forward, my voice low but steady. "Why, Clara?" She frowned. "Why what? Why did you do it?" I asked, my eyes locked on hers. "Why did you accuse me of things I didn't do? Why did you betray me?" Her face hardened. "I already told you why. I thought you—" "No," I interrupted. "You didn't think. You let someone else think for you. Rachel, wasn't it?" Clara's eyes widened, a flicker of panic crossing her face. "What are you talking about?" I reached into my pocket and pulled out the printed messages between her and Rachel, sliding them across the table. This is what I'm talking about." Her hands trembled as she picked up the papers, scanning the contents. Where did you get this? That doesn't matter, I said. What matters is that Rachel lied to you. She fed you stories, planted doubts in your mind. And instead of coming to me, you acted on her lies. Clara's expression shifted, doubt and guilt warring with her pride. I didn't know. No, I said, my voice cold. You didn't care to know. The weight of my words hung heavy in the air, and for the first time, Clara looked genuinely shaken. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. She had no defense, no excuses left to hide behind. The cracks in her armor were widening, and I knew it was only a matter of time before everything came crashing down. Clara sat across from me, her face pale and eyes darting over the messages I had printed out. Her composure, the smug confidence she had displayed for weeks, was unraveling. She folded the papers and set them down with trembling hands. So, what now? She asked, her voice low and uncertain. I leaned back in my chair studying her. That depends on you, Clara. You accused me of infidelity without proof. You humiliated me publicly and betrayed me in the worst way possible. I want to know if you're ready to own up to what you've done. Her lips parted, but no words came out. The silence stretched between us, heavy and oppressive. Finally she sighed, a flicker of defiance still lingering in her eyes. I made a mistake, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But you weren't perfect either, Mark. You were always so distant, so focused on your work. It felt like I wasn't enough. I raised an eyebrow, surprised by her attempt to deflect blame. So your solution was to sleep with Aaron? To concoct lies and turn our friends against me? Clara's eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, I thought she might break down. But she straightened her back, forcing herself to hold my gaze. I don't expect you to forgive me. But I did what I thought I had to do. Her words hung in the air, and I realized something in that moment. Clara wasn't sorry. Not really. She was sorry she had been caught, sorry her lies were unraveling. But the betrayal itself? She had justified it in her mind. I nodded slowly, my decision solidifying. Fair enough, I said, my voice calm. You've made your choices. Now it's my turn. Clara frowned. What does that mean? You'll find out soon enough, I replied, standing and placing a few bills on the table to cover the check. Enjoy the rest of your evening. I walked out of the restaurant without looking back, leaving Clara to stew in her own thoughts. The pieces were almost in place, and the endgame was near. The next step was the most delicate, exposing the truth to the people who mattered. Clara had painted me as the villain, but now it was time to flip the script. I began by contacting a few close friends, individuals whose opinions carried weight within our social circle. I invited them to a casual gathering at my home, framing it as an opportunity to clear the air after the New Year's fiasco. To my relief, they agreed to come. Aaron was also invited, though not as a guest. He was part of the plan. On the day of the gathering, the atmosphere in the house was tense but controlled. Clara hadn't objected to the event, likely because she saw it as an opportunity to repair her image. She didn't know that the night would take a very different turn. As the guests arrived, I greeted them warmly, offering drinks and small talk to set a relaxed tone. Clara, to her credit, played the part of the gracious hostess, though I could see the tension in her smile. When everyone had settled in, I tapped my glass to get their attention. Thank you all for coming, I began, my voice steady. I wanted to take this opportunity to address the rumors that have been circulating about Clara and me. A hush fell over the room, the guests leaning in with anticipation. Clara shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her eyes darting to mine. Over the past few weeks, I continued, there's been a lot of speculation about what happened on New Year's Eve. I think it's only fair that everyone hears the truth. I gestured to Aaron, who was seated in a corner, his face pale. He stood hesitantly, clutching the recorder I had given him earlier. I have a confession to make, Aaron said, his voice shaky. What happened between Clara and me, it was wrong. Mark didn't deserve it. He's been nothing but a good friend, and I betrayed him. Gasps rippled through the room, the guests whispering among themselves. Clara's face turned beet red, and she shot Aaron a glare that could have killed. Aaron continued, his voice growing stronger. Clara convinced me to go along with her plan. She wanted to ruin Mark's reputation, to make him look like the bad guy. But the truth is, Mark was faithful. He didn't deserve any of this. The room erupted into chaos, voices overlapping as the guests processed Aaron's words. Clara stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. This is ridiculous, she shouted, her voice trembling. He's lying. Mark's manipulating him. I remained calm, pulling out the folder containing the printed messages and the PI's report. If anyone wants proof, I have it right here. Clara and Aaron betrayed me, and they were willing to destroy my reputation to cover their tracks. One by one, the guests began to turn on Clara, their expressions shifting from shock to disgust. Clara's carefully constructed image was crumbling, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. As the night wore on, the guests began to leave, their whispers of disbelief echoing in the air. Clara retreated to the bedroom, slamming the door behind her. Aaron left without a word, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I stood in the empty living room, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. The truth was out, and Clara's reign of lies was over. But the game wasn't finished yet. There was still one final move to make. The house was eerily silent the next morning. Clara had locked herself in the bedroom, refusing to come out. I could hear muffled sobs through the door, but I didn't feel pity. Her tears weren't for me, they were for herself, for the image she had worked so hard to cultivate, now shattered beyond repair. I spent the day preparing for what came next. The fallout from the previous night had already begun to ripple through our social circle. Friends who had once sided with Clara now reached out to apologize for doubting me. The tide had turned, but there was still unfinished business. Clara and Aaron hadn't yet faced the full consequences of their actions. That evening, Clara finally emerged from the bedroom, her face pale and eyes puffy from crying. She stood in the doorway of the living room, her arms crossed defensively. "Are you happy now?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You've ruined me." I turned to face her, my expression calm. "No, Clara. You ruined yourself. All I did was show people the truth." She opened her mouth to retort but closed it again, realizing there was no argument to be made. Instead, she sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. For the first time, she looked genuinely defeated. "What happens now?" she asked quietly. "That depends on you," I said. "If you're willing to take responsibility for what you've done, we can figure out a way to move forward. But if you keep denying the truth, there's no path to redemption." She didn't respond, and I didn't press her. Clara needed to sit with her guilt, to feel the weight of her actions. Only then would she understand the magnitude of what she had done. The next morning, I received a text from Aaron. He wanted to meet, claiming he had something important to tell me. I agreed, but I made it clear that this was his last chance to come clean. We met at the same park where I had confronted him before. He looked even worse than the last time, his hair disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. He sat down on the bench across from me, avoiding eye contact. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he began, his voice shaky. "But I need you to know something." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "I'm listening." Aaron hesitated, then reached into his pocket and pulled out a small USB drive. "Rachel was behind everything," he said, his voice trembling. "She hated you, Mark. I don't know why, but she convinced Clara that you were cheating. She even faked the messages to make it look real." I stared at him, my mind racing. Rachel. The coworker I had barely interacted with, the one who had planted seeds of doubt in Clara's mind. It all made sense now. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked, my voice cold. "Because I can't live with the guilt anymore," Aaron admitted. "Rachel, she threatened me, said she'd ruin me if I didn't go along with it. But I can't keep lying, Mark. You deserve the truth." I took the USB drive, my grip tightening around it. This doesn't absolve you, Aaron. You still betrayed me. But if this helps me get to the bottom of things, it's a start. He nodded, his shoulders slumping in relief. I know. And I'm sorry. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. I didn't respond. Instead, I stood and walked away, clutching the USB drive like a lifeline. If what Aaron had said was true, then Rachel was the mastermind behind this entire ordeal. And she wasn't going to get away with it. That night, I plugged the USB drive into my laptop, my heart pounding in anticipation. The files contained a treasure trove of evidence, emails, messages, and even voice recordings of Rachel conspiring against me. She had manipulated Clara, fabricated lies, and orchestrated the betrayal with chilling precision. It was all there, laid bare in black and white. I stared at the screen, a sense of grim satisfaction washing over me. Rachel had underestimated me, just like Clara and Aaron had. But now, I held the upper hand. The final play was in motion, and Rachel would soon learn that her actions had consequences. The evidence on the USB drive was a goldmine. Rachel had left a digital trail so blatant it almost felt like she wanted to be caught. Emails detailing her plans to manipulate Clara, screenshots of fabricated messages she claimed I had sent to other women, and even voice memos boasting about her. Genius. Scheme, it was all there. She had orchestrated every detail with surgical precision, but her arrogance had been her undoing. Armed with this evidence, I knew it was time to strike. I started by compiling a dossier, neatly organizing the evidence into a timeline. Each message, recording, and fabricated lie was presented with undeniable clarity. Once I had everything in order, I reached out to Clara. Come to the study, I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. Clara hesitated in the doorway, her face a mixture of apprehension and exhaustion. What now? Sit, I commanded, gesturing to the chair across from my desk. She reluctantly complied, her hands folded in her lap. I opened my laptop, turning the screen toward her. You need to see this. As the evidence played out before her, Clara's face went through a kaleidoscope of emotions, confusion, disbelief, and finally anger. Rachel, did all of this? She whispered, her voice trembling. Yes, I replied coldly. She manipulated you, fed you lies, and used you as a pawn to destroy me. Clara's hands clenched into fists. I can't believe I trusted her. I leaned forward, my gaze piercing. And yet you did. You let her words poison your mind and destroy our marriage. You humiliated me, Clara. You betrayed me. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't let up. Do you have any idea what you've done? You let your insecurities cloud your judgment, and now we're here, because of your choices. Clara broke down, sobbing into her hands. For a moment, I felt a pang of pity, but I pushed it aside. This wasn't the time for forgiveness. She needed to understand the gravity of her actions. What do we do now? She asked through her tears. I've already started, I said. But you're going to help me clean up this mess. And that starts with Rachel. The next step was contacting Rachel directly. I sent her an email, attaching a single screenshot of one of her incriminating messages. The subject line was simple: we need to talk. She responded within the hour, her tone dripping with fake confidence. I don't know what you're trying to pull, Mark, but I'm not afraid of you. I replied with another email, this time attaching several more pieces of evidence. My message was brief: you should be. It didn't take long for her to cave. She agreed to meet me at a public cafe the next day, likely hoping to keep things civil and controlled. What she didn't know was that I had no intention of keeping things quiet. When Rachel arrived, her demeanor was smug, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She sat across from me, folding her hands neatly on the table. What do you want, Mark? She asked, feigning calm. I slid the dossier across the table. This. All of it. You're going to confess to everything you've done. Rachel's face blanched as she flipped through the pages. You can't prove. I can, I interrupted. And I will. But I'm giving you a chance to make this right. You'll admit to Clara that you lied, and you'll apologize publicly for the damage you've caused." Her lips curled into a sneer. "And if I don't?" I leaned closer, lowering my voice. "Then I take this to your employer, your family, and everyone in your life who thinks you're worth a damn. You'll lose everything, Rachel. And I'll make sure you feel every second of it." Rachel's bravado crumbled. She looked away, her hands trembling. "Fine," she muttered. "I'll do it. You'll do it today," I said firmly. "And if you try to back out, I'll make good on my promise." Rachel nodded, defeated. I stood, leaving her to stew in her own humiliation. That evening, Rachel sent a public apology to Clara, admitting to her lies and manipulation. She confessed to fabricating the messages and admitted that her actions had been driven by jealousy and spite. Clara forwarded the message to me, her face a mixture of relief and shame. "I don't know what to say," she murmured. "Say nothing," I replied. "Just do better." With Rachel's confession circulating among our social circle, the truth was finally out. The people who had doubted me now rallied behind me, their apologies pouring in. Clara was left to pick up the pieces of her shattered reputation, while Rachel disappeared from our lives entirely. But my work wasn't done. There was still one final piece to the puzzle, one last reckoning that would ensure no one ever underestimated me again. With Rachel's public confession, the storm that had consumed my life began to settle. Friends and acquaintances reached out, apologizing for ever doubting me, and Clara became a pariah in her own right. She withdrew from our social circle, her once proud demeanor replaced by quiet shame. But for me, there was still one last move to make. Forgiveness wasn't on the table, not for Clara, and certainly not for Aaron. They had both betrayed me in ways I could never forget. My revenge needed to be final, decisive, and unforgettable. I started with Aaron. His gambling debts, which I had discovered through the private investigator, provided the perfect leverage. Using an anonymous account, I sent the incriminating evidence of his financial woes to his employer. Within days he was fired, his reputation as a reliable employee shattered. Next, I forwarded the same information to the individuals he owed money to. It didn't take long for them to start pressuring him for payment, their demands growing increasingly aggressive. Aaron had no way out, and the walls were closing in on him. One evening, he showed up at my doorstep, his face gaunt and eyes hollow. "Mark," he pleaded, "please, I need your help. I don't know what to do." I stared at him, my expression cold. "You made your bed, Aaron. Now lie in it." I closed the door in his face, leaving him to face the consequences of his actions. I didn't feel guilt. He had betrayed me, and now he was paying the price. Clara was next. While she had already suffered public humiliation, I needed to ensure she wouldn't be able to manipulate anyone else the way she had manipulated me. Using the evidence I had gathered, I filed for divorce, citing infidelity and emotional abuse. My lawyer was relentless, ensuring that Clara would walk away with nothing but the clothes on her back. The house, the car, the savings, all of it was mine. When the papers were finalized, Clara confronted me one last time. "Is this what you wanted?" she demanded, tears streaming down her face. "To destroy me?" I met her gaze, unflinching. "I didn't destroy you, Clara. You destroyed yourself. All I did was make sure you faced the consequences." She looked at me with a mixture of anger and despair, but I felt nothing. Clara had made her choices, and now she was living with the fallout. With Clara and Aaron out of my life, I turned my attention to rebuilding. The truth had set me free, and I was determined to move forward without the weight of their betrayal holding me back. But as I sat in my now quiet house, a sense of closure settled over me. The people who had wronged me had been exposed, their actions laid bare for the world to see. My reputation, once tarnished, was now restored. Still, the scars they had left behind would remain, a reminder of what happens when trust is betrayed. And though I had won, the victory tasted bittersweet. Betrayal may have been avenged, but the price of vengeance was steep. As I stared out the window at the setting sun, I made a vow to myself: never again would I allow anyone to hold power over me. Never again would I let betrayal take me by surprise. And in the end, I walked away stronger, colder, and unbreakable. If you want more stories like this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe,